The vent cover came off with a familiar metallic groan. Leo wiped a smear of grease from his cheek, the grimy scent of lubricant and ozone filling his nostrils. It was the perfume of Sector 7, the only world humanity had ever known. Below him, the guts of the station sprawled out, a tangle of silver pipes and color-coded conduits humming with the energy that kept 500,000 souls alive. You see that, Leo? Dave's voice crackled through his comms, cheerful and annoying as always. The Kestrels are up by 3 points. 3 points. I'm telling you, this is their cycle. I see a corroded plasma flow regulator, Dave, Leo grumbled, pointing his light into the dark recess. Which is what I'm supposed to be looking at. Ah, you're no fun. Live a little. It's just a regulator, it's not going anywhere. Leo grunted. That was the thing about Sector 7. Nothing ever went anywhere. For 200 years they had drifted in this metal bubble, protected from the cold, dead void by the barrier. The barrier was everything. It gave them air, it gave them gravity, it gave them light that mimicked a sun and a moon. It was a cradle, their priest engineers called it. A perfect, self-contained little world. Leo hated it. He hated the recycled air that always tasted of metal, the food paste that was always beige, and the unshakable feeling that he was a hamster in a very, very large wheel. He was lining up his torque wrench when a flicker of movement caught his eye in the corridor behind Dave. It wasn't a person. It was just wrong. A piece of the shadow in the corner detached itself, stretching like hot tar. It was tall and thin, impossibly thin, and it unfolded in a way that made Leo's stomach clench. It had too many joints. Dave, Leo said, his voice suddenly tight. Turn around, slowly. What? Did you see a rat bot? I told maintenance those things were getting bold. The shadow thing took a step. It made no sound. The station's ever-present hum seemed to die in its presence. There was just a sudden, profound silence, a pocket of dead air. Dave! Now! Leo screamed, scrambling back from the open vent. Dave turned. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a perfect O of surprise. He didn't even have time to scream. The thing didn't lunge or attack. It simply reached out with a long, multi-jointed arm. Where its hand touched Dave's chest, Dave just came apart. It wasn't an explosion, it was more like an erasure. One moment Dave was a solid man, full of bad jokes and opinions about zero-G sports. The next, he was a fine red mist that hung in the air for a second before vanishing. Gone, every part of him. His uniform, his communit, his pathetic hope for the Kestrels. Vanished into nothing. All that was left was a faint reddish smear on the deck plate, and a sudden biting cold that felt like it was freezing Leo's lungs. The shadow thing retracted its arm. For a single heart-stopping second, it turned its head. It had no face, just a smooth, obsidian-like surface that seemed to drink the light. It looked right at Leo. It saw him, and then it folded back into the corner, melting into the shadows as if it had never been there. Leo was frozen, his torque wrench clutched in a white-knuckled grip. The silence was broken by the crackle of his comms. Unit 47, report. We registered a pressure fluctuation in your vicinity. He couldn't speak. He could only stare at the spot where his friend had been. On the floor, where the red smear was already starting to dry, lay a small dark object. It hadn't been there before. It was a piece of the thing. A piece it had dropped. Trembling, Leo reached down and picked it up. It was smooth, cold, and impossibly heavy for its size. And it wasn't made of any metal he had ever seen. Unit 47, do you copy? The voice from the comms insisted, irritated now. Leo finally found his voice, a raw, broken whisper. Man down. Dave's gone. There was a pause. Gone where? Did he fall into the maintenance shaft? Leo looked at the empty corridor, the clean spot on the floor, and felt a laugh bubble up in his throat. A raw, hysterical sound. No, he choked out. He was hunted. The official report called it a catastrophic pressure valve failure, a freak accident. Dave Miller, maintenance tech second class, was tragically atomized. A memorial service was scheduled. Grief counselors were made available. The reddish smear on the deck plate was scrubbed clean before Leo was even released from the infirmary. They said he was in shock, that he had hallucinated the shadowy figure. Leo didn't argue. He just nodded, his face a blank mask. Arguing was for people who thought the world made sense. Leo's world had been torn open, and he'd seen the horrifying emptiness on the other side. They pumped him full of sedatives and he pretended to be calm. But in the privacy of his cramped bunk, he would take out the object. It was the size of his thumb, shaped like a shard of broken glass but with no sharp edges. It was black, but not a simple black. It was a deep, light-swallowing void. No matter how he turned it, it reflected nothing. It was dense, heavier than lead, and always cold to the touch. He'd run a diagnostic on it with his personal toolkit. The scanner just fizzled out, the screen flashing UXIV, Matter Enganda. He started noticing things, small things. A missing person report on the community bulletin, quickly replaced by a cheerful notice about a new hydroponics yield. A hushed conversation in the mess hall that stopped the moment he walked past. The official story was that people got transferred to different levels, or chose a period of somatic reassignment, a fancy term for long-term cryo-sleep. But the numbers felt wrong. Too many transfers. Too many sudden retirements. His new partner was a kid named Ren, barely 20 cycles old, with wide, trusting eyes. Ren believed in the Kestrels, in the goodness of the Sector Council, and in the sanctity of the barrier. He believed Dave Miller had died in a tragic accident. "It's a dangerous job," Ren said one day as they were recalibrating a gravity plate. "You gotta be careful down in the shafts." "It wasn't the shaft that got him," Leo said, his voice flat. Ren gave him a sympathetic look. "The psych eval said you're still processing the trauma. It's okay, Leo. Sometimes the mind plays tricks to cope." Leo wanted to scream. He wanted to grab the kid by his clean, crisp uniform and shake him until his teeth rattled. It wasn't a trick. It was a monster with too many joints, and it unmade a man right in front of me. But he said nothing. He just tightened a bolt until his knuckles turned white. Saying it out loud would get him a one-way trip to the psych ward, where they'd dose him into a smiling, drooling idiot. He would be no use to Dave or to himself. There. He started his own investigation. At night, when he was supposed to be sleeping, he used his high-level maintenance access to slice into the station's archives. He wasn't a master hacker, but he knew the system's back doors. He knew its guts. He looked for patterns. He cross-referenced missing persons reports with maintenance logs for pressure fluctuations, atmospheric leaks, and electrical surges. He found them, dozens of them, stretching back years, decades. Always a single casualty. Always in a low-traffic area. Always explained away with a neat, plausible, technical excuse It was a quiet, systematic culling. A harvest. One name kept popping up as the signing officer on these incident reports. Anya Sharma. Chief Maintenance Officer. A name Leo knew. She was a legend, a lifer, who'd been fixing the station's guts since before he was born. She was old, weathered, and had a reputation for being as tough as a cryo-welded hull plate. He found his chance a week later. A call came in for a coolant leak in sub-level 12, a place of old decommissioned systems and thick dust. It was a two-person job. He made sure Ren was assigned elsewhere. When he got there, Anya was already waiting for him, her face grim under the harsh utility lights. "Took you long enough, Miller's replacement," she said, her voice like gravel. She didn't call him Leo. "The name's Leo," he said. "I know your name," she said, turning her back on him and pointing a wrench at a hissing pipe. "I also know you've been poking around in secured files. You think I don't get a flag when someone accesses my reports?" Leo's blood ran cold. "I was just curious." Anya let out her harsh, barking laugh. "Curious. That's what they call it. Kid, there are two types of people on this station. Those who see something they shouldn't and keep their mouths shut, and ghosts. You're on your way to becoming a ghost." She turned to face him, her dark eyes pinning him in place. "You saw it, didn't you? When Miller bought it, you saw one of them." Leo swallowed hard, his throat dry. He just nodded. "And you picked something up," she stated. It wasn't a question. Loudly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the black shard. He held it out on his palm. Anya didn't look surprised. She looked tired, bone-tired. "I've seen 3 of those in my lifetime," she said quietly. "Belonged to 3 curious people. Drop it, kid. Drop the shard. Drop the questions. Go back to fixing pipes and pretending the world is safe. It's the only way to stay alive in the herd." "The herd?" Leo asked, his voice a whisper. Anya's eyes were bleak. "What do you call animals kept in a pen for a purpose, Leo? You don't call them citizens. You call them livestock." Anya led him deeper into sub-level 12, to a section that wasn't on any official map. The air here was stale and cold, the only light coming from their headlamps. She stopped at a solid bulkhead, featureless except for a small, almost invisible seam. She pressed her palm against a specific spot, and a hidden panel slid open with a sigh of ancient hydraulics. "The old archives," she said, gesturing him inside. "From before the council sealed everything. Before they started rewriting history." The room was small, filled with humming data servers that looked impossibly archaic. Anya moved to a console, her fingers flying across a keyboard that wasn't a holographic interface, but a physical one with clacking keys. "The official history tells us we are the last of humanity," she said, not looking at him. "That Earth is gone, a victim of some great cataclysm, and our ancestors barely escaped, building Sector 7 as their ark. They built the barrier to protect us from the hostile void." "That's what they teach us in school," Leo said, his voice echoing in the small, cold room. "It's a lie," Anya said, her voice sharp. "A beautiful, comforting lie to keep the cattle calm. Oh, Earth is probably gone. But we weren't survivors who escaped. We were cargo." On the screen, lines of text scrolled past. Old ship manifests and mission logs. The ship's name was the Warden, not the Pioneer or the Hope. The Warden. The manifest wasn't a list of brave colonists. It was itemized. Cryopods, 10,000. Genetic samples, assorted. Embryo banks, 500. It read like an inventory for a farm. "They didn't build the barrier to keep the void out," Anya whispered. her face illuminated by the green glow of the screen. They built it to keep us in. Leo felt a wave of nausea. His entire life, his entire world, was a carefully constructed cage. The sun and moon were just lights on the ceiling. The sky was a projection. The safety he'd taken for granted was the security of a prison. But why? Who are they? The things that took Dave. I don't know what they are, Anya admitted, slumping back in her chair. I call them the stalkers. The old logs have fragmented data, corrupted files from the first generation born here. They talk about watchers in the dark, the silent ones. They seem to exist just outside our perception. They can phase through walls, mimic shadows. They aren't from our reality. This station, this whole sector, is like an anchor point for them. A place where they can cross over. She pointed to a line of corrupted code on the screen. I think the barrier does more than just keep us in. It emits a specific frequency, an energy field. I think that field is what allows them to manifest here. It's not a shield, it's a welcome mat. Leo's mind reeled. The very thing that was supposed to be their salvation was the instrument of their damnation. And they just hunt us. For sport. For sport, for food, for reasons we can't even comprehend, Anya said, her gaze distant. They are patient. They take one or two at a time. Never enough to cause a panic. Just enough to feed their appetites, the council. They're either in on it collaborators who get to live in luxury in exchange for managing the herd. Or they're just the head sheep, too ignorant or terrified to admit the truth. Anya gave him a pitying look. With what? Pipe wrenches and rivet guns. They can walk through walls, Leo. They can unmake a person with a touch. Culling people would cause a mass panic, a riot. The stalkers would feast. We'd be doing their job for them. So we just do nothing, Leo demanded, his voice rising. We let them pick us off one by one. I've been doing nothing for 40 years, kid. It's kept me alive, she retorted. But you're different. You have that fire, the kind that gets people killed. She sighed, a long, weary sound. I've tried to find a weakness. There's one theory, one long shot, based on these old logs. She typed a new command, and a schematic of the station's power grid filled the screen. It was a complex web of conduits and relays. The barrier generator is the main power draw, she explained, tracing a line with her finger. It's untouchable, shielded, buried deep in the core, but its energy is stabilized by a series of secondary conduits. Specifically this one. She highlighted a conduit running through the outer shell, the very edge of the station. Conduit 734. It handles the harmonic resonance that keeps the barrier field stable. According to these old notes, a sudden specific overload in 734 wouldn't shut the barrier down, not completely. But it might disrupt the frequency. It might make it flicker. Flicker? Leo asked. What good would that do? If the field is what lets them cross over, Anya said, her eyes gleaming with a desperate hope. A flicker might be like slamming a door in their face. It might disconnect them, banish them. Or maybe it'll just make them angry. Maybe it will blow a hole in the station and kill us all. She looked at him, her expression dead serious. It's a gamble, and if we try it, they will know. They will come for us. Leo thought of Dave, of his cheerful voice being silenced forever. He thought of the 500,000 people living in this gilded cage, waiting their turn to be erased. He wasn't a hero, he was a maintenance tech. But maybe, just maybe, he could be a saboteur. Okay, he said, his voice steady. How do we blow it up? The trip to the outer shell was a descent into a forgotten world. The lifts didn't go this far, so they had to use service ladders. Climbing down through dusty, silent levels, where the only sound was the drip of condensation and the distant hum of the station's lifeblood. The air grew colder, thinner. Here the pretense of a normal world was gone. There were no fake sky panels, no ambient lighting. Just bare metal walls sweating in the deep space chill, and the raw, oppressive presence of the void just a few feet away. They don't like it out here, Anya said, her voice a low whisper that the darkness seemed to swallow. Too cold, too quiet. Not enough people, not enough life to snack on. Leo didn't feel reassured, he felt exposed. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every flicker of his headlamp seemed to catch a glimpse of something tall and thin at the edge of his vision. He kept his hand on the heavy wrench tucked into his belt, a useless comfort. They reached a junction, a circular chamber where massive insulated cables snaked along the walls like frozen pythons. This was the edge of the inhabited station. Beyond a heavy airlock door was the outer shell, a maintenance corridor that was essentially a vacuum-sealed tube bolted to the station's hide. Conduit 734 runs through there, Anya said, pointing at the airlock. We'll have to suit up. As she began to unlatch a locker containing two old, bulky environment suits, a flicker of red light caught Leo's eye. It was a small status indicator on a security panel he hadn't noticed before. It was blinking. An access log. Someone's been here, Leo said, his voice tight. Recently. Anya froze, her hand on the locker. She walked over to the panel, her face grim. Security patrol. They don't come down this far. Not unless they're sent. A sudden sharp clang echoed from the ladder shaft they just descended. It was the sound of a heavy boot on a metal rung. Then another. Someone was coming. Fast. Go, Anya hissed, shoving Leo towards the airlock. Get a suit on, now. What about you? Leo asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. I'll buy you time, she said, pulling a plasma cutter from her tool belt. It was a heavy industrial tool, not a weapon, but in her hand it looked deadly. The code for the conduit overload is 8-1-5-8. At the main terminal, you have to manually disengage the 3 safety cutoffs first. They're marked in red. Go. Leo fumbled with the bulky, heavy suit, his fingers clumsy with adrenaline. The metallic clanging was closer now. He could hear voices, sharp and authoritative. Station security, but why would they be running? Why the urgency? He got the helmet on, the hiss of the suit's life support filling his ears. Through the thick plexiglass, he saw Anya, standing before the ladder shaft, the plasma cutter held in a two-handed grip, its tip glowing with angry blue potential. "Anya, come on," he yelled, his voice tinny and distant through the suit's comms. "The herd needs a shepherd, kid," she said, her voice crackling back. "Or maybe just a stubborn old sheepdog. Now get out of here before you get us both killed." The first security officer dropped into the chamber. He was dressed in the black tactical gear of the station's elite patrol. He raised his pulse rifle. "Stand down, Sharma! By order of the Council." "The Council doesn't give orders down here," Anya snarled and activated the cutter. A brilliant blue-white beam, a foot long, shot out with a deafening hiss. Leo didn't wait to see more. He slammed the inner airlock door shut and hit the cycle button. Through the small porthole, he saw two more officers drop down. They weren't trying to arrest her. They were flanking her, and behind them, flowing down the wall like black water, came a stalker. It wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. It was solid, real, and utterly nightmarish. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, its smooth, featureless face turning towards Anya. The security officers weren't there to stop her. They were there to corner her, to hold the prey in place for the hunter. The Council knew they were collaborators. The outer door slid open, revealing the outer shell. It was a narrow, curved tunnel, the station's hull on one side, and on the other, a thick, reinforced viewport that looked out into space. But there were no stars. There was only the shimmering, milky white energy of the barrier, just yards away. It felt like being inside a light bulb. Leo stumbled into the corridor, his magnetic boots clumping heavily on the walkway. He turned for one last look through the porthole. Anya saw him. She saw the stalker moving behind the officers. She gave him a grim, final nod. Then she lunged, not at the officers, but at a massive power junction on the wall, swinging the plasma cutter like an axe. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, a brilliant flash of white light that blew the inner airlock door off its hinges and sent bodies flying. The last thing Leo saw before he forced himself to run was the stalker, momentarily thrown back by the blast of raw energy, shrieking a silent, hateful scream. Anya had bought him time. He couldn't let it be for nothing. He ran, his breath ragged, his heart a frantic drum against the confines of the suit. He ran along the curve of the universe, with the blinding light of his prison wall to his right, and the ghosts of his past chasing him from behind. The run felt like an eternity. The curved corridor of the outer shell was disorienting, the constant silent glare of the barrier just outside the viewport pressing in on him. It wasn't a comforting light. It was a sterile, watchful illumination that left no shadows to hide in. Leo felt like a microbe on a slide, about to be examined. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see a long-limbed silhouette rounding the bend. But there was nothing, only the echo of Anya's sacrifice pushing him forward. He found the terminal for conduit, 734, exactly where the schematic said it would be, nestled in an alcove bristling with cables. It was a heavy-duty maintenance panel, built to withstand the rigors of the void. A small screen glowed with status indicators, all of them a calm, reassuring green. "You have to manually disengage the 3 safety cutoffs first," Anya's voice in his head. He saw them, 3 large red levers, sealed under thick plastic covers. He flipped the first cover open. It was stiff, designed to prevent accidental use. He gripped the lever. It felt like he was putting his hand on the heart of the station. Pulling it was an act of ultimate vandalism, of heresy. He thought of Dave turning into red mist. He pulled. An alarm blared inside his helmet, a shrill, insistent beep. The screen on the terminal flashed yellow. Warning. Sacity. Prodicone. He moved to the second lever. As his gloved hand touched the plastic cover, a flicker of movement reflected in the viewport. He spun around, wrench at the ready. Nothing. The corridor was empty. But the feeling of being watched intensified. A cold prickle on the back of his neck that had nothing to do with the temperature of his suit. They knew where he was. They were playing with him. He popped the second cover and pulled the lever. The alarm in his helmet grew louder, more frantic. Warning. Tico failure imminent. The calm green lights on the panel had all turned a flashing angry red. One more. He reached for the third lever, and that's when it appeared. It didn't walk around the corner. It simply coalesced out of the air, in the middle of the corridor, about 20 feet away. It unfolded itself from a knot of impossible angles, rising to its full terrifying height of 8 feet. This one seemed different from the one in the access chamber. It was sleeker, darker, its obsidian skin, absorbing the light of the barrier so completely, it looked like a hole cut out of reality. It just stood there watching him. Leo was frozen, his hand hovering over the final lever. His mind screamed at him to pull it, to finish the job, but his body wouldn't obey. He was paralyzed by a primal fear, the terror of a mouse, realizing the cat has been watching it from the corner the entire time. Then a voice spoke in his head. It wasn't sound, it was a direct impression, a cold clinical thought that was not his own. The creature is small. It scurries in the walls. It thinks its nest is the universe. The stalker took a slow, silent step forward. Its gait was wrong, a smooth liquid motion that his brain couldn't properly process. You seek to break the glass, the voice continued, laced with a calm, ancient amusement. You do not understand. The glass is not your cage. It is your context. Without it, you are nothing. A smear of meaningless biology in an endless, hungry dark. It took another step. It was 10 feet away now. Leo could see the non-light of its featureless face, could feel a psychic pressure building against his mind. It was showing him things, images, feelings. It showed him the vast, crushing emptiness between stars. It showed him civilizations rising and falling in the blink of a cosmic eye, their triumphs and tragedies amounting to less than a puff of dust. It showed him his own life, his small hopes and petty frustrations, as a pointless, flickering candle in an infinite hurricane. We give you purpose, the voice whispered in his soul. You live, you breed, you fear, you die. It is a simple, clean existence. In the grand scheme, it is a mercy. Mercy? Leo croaked, his voice cracking. He wasn't sure if he said it out loud or just thought it. It didn't matter, the stalker heard. It was 5 feet away. It raised one of its long, multi-jointed arms. Leo could see the tip of its appendage, the point that had unmade Dave. It was a tapering, glossy black point of absolute nothing. We are the shepherds. We protect you from the true wolves. Rage, hot and pure, finally burned through the icy terror. Rage for Dave. Rage for Anya. Rage for the generations of human beings who had lived and died as cattle. You're not shepherds, Leo snarled. And with a final desperate surge of will, he slammed his hand down. He didn't just pull the third lever. He smashed the plastic cover. and yanked the metal handle with all his strength. The alarm in his helmet became a single, solid, deafening tone. Critical overload. The screen on the panel went white. The stalker lunged. The cold voice in his head turned into a shriek of pure, undiluted fury. The black-pointed finger was inches from his chest. And then the universe broke. The first thing that happened was the light. The milky, oppressive light of the barrier didn't just flicker. It shattered. For a split second, it condensed into an infinitely bright point, and then exploded outwards in a wave of silent, visible energy. The wave washed over Leo, harmless, but it hit the stalker like a physical blow. The creature convulsed. Its smooth, obsidian skin cracked, revealing a blinding, chaotic energy beneath. The silent shriek in Leo's mind became a sound he could almost hear. A tearing, grinding noise of a thing being ripped from its anchor in reality. The stalker's form destabilized, its sharp angles blurring, its solid blackness flickering into a translucent, ghostly gray. It reached for Leo, not with malice now, but with a strange, desperate agony, as if he were a life raft and it was drowning. Then, with a final silent pop, it dissolved into a cloud of drifting black motes that quickly faded to nothing. The station groaned around Leo, a deep, tectonic shudder of tortured metal. Red emergency lights began to flash along the corridor, replacing the sterile white of the barrier with a pulsing, hellish crimson. The deafening alarm in his helmet was now joined by the station-wide klaxon, a sound he had only ever heard in drills. He was alive. He had done it. He stumbled to the viewport, his legs shaking. He pressed his helmet against the thick, cold plasteel and looked out. It was gone. The barrier was gone. For the first time in his life, for the first time in any Sector 7 citizen's life for 200 years, he saw the truth. He saw the unfiltered, terrifying and achingly beautiful reality of space. It was not a gentle, empty black. It was a riot of impossible color. Great, swirling nebulas of purple and blue gas. The fierce, brilliant fire of distant suns. The cold, serene light of a billion stars. He saw a galaxy, a vast, pinwheeling spiral of light, so huge and majestic it made his chest ache. They weren't alone in a dead void. They were in the heart of a living, breathing cosmos. The lie was so much bigger than he had ever imagined. They hadn't just been kept in a cage. They had been kept in a dark room with the curtains drawn, told the world outside didn't exist. A new voice crackled in his comms, breaking through the alarms. It was shaky, terrified, and came from the station's central command. Unknown energy surge detected. The barrier is down. I repeat, the barrier is down. We have visual on the outside. Gods, we have visual. Leo looked at his own reflection in the viewport, a small, tired man in a bulky suit, staring out at infinity. The hunt was over. The stalkers were gone, their welcome mat ripped out from under them. He had won. He had freed them. And as he stared into the endless star-dusted dark, a new cold thought crept into his mind. The stalkers had called themselves shepherds, protecting the sheep from the true wolves. He was standing in a wilderness vaster and more unknown than any human had ever conceived. And he had just rung the dinner bell. The station was a madhouse. With the barrier gone, the fundamental laws of Sector 7 physics had been rewritten. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending people and objects floating 1 minute and slamming them to the deck the next. The simulated sun and moon were dead. leaving the station lit only by the cold. Pulsing red of the emergency lights and the alien starlight filtering through the main viewports. Panic was a tangible thing, a screaming, contagious fever. People poured out of their habitats, staring at the impossible sight of the galaxy outside, their faces a mixture of awe and stark terror. The council was silent. Their authority had vanished along with the barrier. The security forces that had hunted Leo and Anya were now just terrified people in uniforms, trying to control a populace that had just learned their entire existence was a lie. Leo made his way back from the outer shell, moving through the chaos like a ghost. No one noticed him. He was just another face in the panicked crowd. He ditched the EV suit in a deserted maintenance locker, the ghost of Anya's sacrifice a lead weight in his gut. He had done what she wanted, but he felt no triumph, only a profound and weary emptiness. He found a quiet corner in a transit hub, sitting on a supply crate as people rushed past him. He could see a large viewport at the end of the hall. People were crowded around it, pointing at the swirling cosmic wonders outside. For 2 centuries, they had been told they were the last sparks of humanity in a cold, dead universe. Now, they knew they were just a lost bottle, tossed into an ocean of unimaginable size. A young woman near him was crying, clutching a small child. "What's going to happen to us?" she sobbed, to no one in particular. "Where do we go?" No one had an answer. They were adrift. The station had minimal sublight engines, designed only for minute course corrections, not for travel. They were a ship without a sail or a rudder, free but stranded. He pulled the black shard from his pocket. It felt different now, less cold, almost inert. A dead piece of a dead monster. He thought about the stalker's final mental projection. "We protect you from the true wolf." Was it a final desperate lie or a warning? Days turned into a new, strange rhythm. A provisional government formed, made up of engineers and hydroponics chiefs, practical people who focused on the immediate problems. Power was rationed, air and water recycling were triple-checked. The gravity was eventually stabilized to a constant weak 0.8 Gs. A new calendar was started. Day 1, post-barrier. Leo went back to work. There were a million things broken. He fixed pipes, rerouted power, and patched leaks. It was mindless work, and he was grateful for it. It kept him from thinking too much about the silent, star-dusted infinity outside. He never told anyone what he did. He let them think the barrier had failed on its own. He didn't want to be a hero. He just wanted to be a mechanic. About a month after the barrier fell, a young tech from the communications array found him in a service conduit. "Leo Kane?" the tech asked, her eyes wide. "They told me I might find you here." "Something broken?" Leo asked, not looking up from the wiring panel he was fixing. "Number somethings. Been found," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I was running deep-range diagnostics, trying to boost our comms, see if we could pick up anything at all. I was scanning old broad-spectrum frequencies, the kind they used back on Earth." Leo stopped working. He turned to look at her. "I found a signal, Leo," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "It's old, automated, a simple repeating beacon. It's been broadcasting for more than 200 years. "What does it say?" Leo asked, his voice hoarse. The tech fumbled with her datapad, her hands shaking. She played the recording. It was faint, buried in static, but unmistakable. A human voice, a woman, calm and clear. "This is Colonial Administration Beacon 7, broadcasting on all emergency channels. To the vessel warden, your cargo is considered lost. To any survivors of Colony Project Sector 7, be advised. Your quarantine has been breached. You are located in the Perseus Arm, an uncolonized and hostile territory. Do not attempt contact. Do not broadcast your position. A recovery and decontamination team has been dispatched. Estimated time of arrival: 150 standard years. Hold your position. Do not engage with any non-Terran life. I repeat, do not engage. The message looped, starting again. Leo stared at the tech, then at the datapad. Colonial Administration. Recovery and Decontamination Team. They weren't the last of humanity. They were a failed, forgotten experiment. A science project left in a dark closet. And someone, somewhere, knew they were here. Someone was coming. But the most chilling part was the date of the broadcast. It was old. The recovery team had been dispatched long ago. If their ETA was 150 years, they should have arrived 50 years ago. Where were they? As if in answer, a new alarm began to sound through the station. Not the frantic klaxon of the overload, but a deep, resonant chime. The proximity alert. An object was approaching the station. Leo and the tech ran, joining the flood of people heading for the main viewports. Everyone was buzzing with a wild, desperate hope. The recovery team. They were here. They were saved. He pushed his way to the front of the crowd in the main observation dome. He stared out into the starfield, and he saw it. It was a ship, but it was like no ship he could have ever imagined. It was vast, miles long, and it wasn't made of metal. It looked organic, like a great, calcified bone, pitted and ancient. It was shaped something like a crescent, a silent skeletal smile against the backdrop of the nebula. There were no lights, no viewports, no signs of life. It just drifted towards them, an object of profound and ancient dread. The comms system crackled to life, a voice from the new Provisional Council, strained with disbelief. We are receiving a transmission from the unidentified vessel. It's not audio. It's a direct psychic broadcast. It's patching it through. Silence fell over the dome, and then a voice filled their minds. It was not the cold, clinical voice of the stalker. It was older, hungrier, a voice of absolute, predatory certainty. A voice that belonged to a true wolf that had just heard a dinner bell. The pen is broken. The voice echoed in every man, woman, and child's mind. The shepherds are gone. How lucky for us. The flock is finally free to be devoured. Leo looked at the horrified faces around him. He looked out at the bone-white ship, a silent harbinger of a doom far greater than the one they had just escaped. They had been livestock in a cage. Now they were just food in an open field, and the real hunt was about to begin.